All right, you fluffy animal-loving bastards, gather round for a deep dive into this All Creatures Great and Small remake. Turns out there's more to this heartwarming countryside shit than meets the eye. We got an expert here who's going to break it all down, so let's cut the crap and get right to it.
You're damn right. The original show from the 70s is practically worshipped by some, but this new one, it's not afraid to stir the pot.
Yeah, it's like they took the original and injected it with a shot of pure Yorkshire grit.
Exactly. For starters, they actually cast a Scottish dude to play James, and surprise, surprise, he actually sounds Scottish. Can you believe they told the original James to tone down his accent back in the day?
What the fuck? Why the hell would they do that?
Apparently, some dipshit producer thought a thick Scottish accent wouldn't fly with audiences outside of Scotland. Talk about underestimating the audience's intelligence.
It's mind-boggling. Like they thought people couldn't handle a bit of authentic dialect. What a load of bullshit.
Right. It's fascinating how these decisions about accents can completely change how we see a character. And speaking of changes, let's talk about Siegfried. He's a whole different beast in the remake.
Oh yeah, the new Siegfried's got this whole tortured widower thing going on. It's like they took the original and added a layer of life's a bitch to him.
It's a brilliant move, honestly. It gives him a depth that wasn't really there before. He's not just a grumpy old vet anymore. He's a man wrestling with loss and trying to find his way in the world.
And they didn't stop there. They even gave Mrs. Hall a major makeover. She's gone from background character to a full-fledged badass.
Absolutely. She's younger, more involved in the practice, and even has her own potential love interest. It's a huge departure from the original, but it adds so much to the dynamic of the show.
More Mrs. Hall is never a bad thing, that's for sure. But what about all the animal action? How much of that shit is actually real?
Well, prepare to have your mind blown, because a lot of it is fake as hell. Prosthetics, clever editing, you name it. They've got tricks up their sleeves that would make David Copperfield jealous.
Get the fuck out of here. You're telling me those aren't real cows giving birth and whatnot?
Nope. There's this one scene where a cow gives birth, and it looks so real you'd swear they just happened to catch it on film. But it was all done with a prosthetic cow and some seriously skilled editing.
That's fucking wild. It makes you wonder what else they're pulling the wool over our eyes with.
Right. And speaking of things that are real, did you hear about the time Nicholas Ralph, the new James, almost got trampled by a runaway cow? Now that shit was authentic.
Jesus Christ, talk about method acting. Did he at least get a good story out of it?
Oh, I'm sure he does. It's probably one of those you had to be there kind of things. But it just goes to show that even with all the fake animal shenanigans, there's still a level of real danger involved in making this show.
Makes you appreciate the dedication of these actors, even if they're surrounded by fake cows and sheep half the time. But speaking of authenticity, did they at least film this thing in the actual town where James Herriot practiced?
They wanted to, but Thirsk, the real-life Darrow bee, got too big and modern. Wouldn't have had that charming village vibe. They ended up using Grassington for most of the Darrow scenes.
So they went for a fake town to keep it authentic. That's some ironic shit right there.
It's all about creating the right atmosphere, even if it means bending reality a little. But you gotta give them props for attention to detail. They even researched the type of wallpaper they used back in the 30s to make sure it was accurate.
Damn, that's dedication. They really went all out on this remake.
Mm-hmm.
But enough about wallpaper and fake cows. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. The whole World War II thing looming over everything.
The shit starts to get real as the series progresses. You've got characters wrestling with whether to enlist the drama with the TB testing and this constant sense of dread hanging over everything. It's heavy stuff.
And they were making this show during a pandemic. Talk about life imitating art. Did they play up the whole world's gone to shit vibe because of that?
It's hard to say for sure, but the timing is definitely uncanny. It adds a whole other layer of resonance to the story, especially when you see the characters grappling with uncertainty and fear.
It's like they accidentally tapped into this collective anxiety we're all feeling. Pretty fucked up, but also kind of brilliant. But hey, enough with the doom and gloom. We gotta talk about the most pampered pooch in history. Tricky Woo. That little fucker lives a life of luxury most humans can only dream of.
Oh, Tricky Woo. Mrs. Pumphrey babies that dog like he's made of solid gold. But here's the kicker. The character is based on a real client of Alf White, the actual James Herriot. She had a Pekingese named Bambi and spoiled him just as much.
So truth is stranger than fiction. Sometimes the most outlandish characters are the ones ripped straight from reality. But before we get too deep into the real-life inspirations, let's take a quick break.
All right, let's dig into how this remake handles the characters, because honestly, they've given them a serious upgrade.
Yeah, it's like they took the originals, threw them in a blender with a shot of whiskey and a dash of modern sensibility, and poured out something completely different.
That's a pretty damn accurate description. Take Siegfried, for instance. In the original, he's a bit gruff, but lovable, right? But in the remake, they've given him this underlying sadness. It's like they're acknowledging that life can knock the wind out of you.
He's like a grumpy old bastard with a heart of gold, but the gold's been through some shit, tarnished by life's bullshit.
Exactly. And that makes him so much more relatable. It's not just about being a grumpy vet, it's about being a man who's experienced loss and is trying to find his way forward. They don't shy away from showing his vulnerability, which is a pretty bold move for a character like that.
And they didn't just stop at Siegfried. They gave Mrs. Hall a complete overhaul. She's gone from frumpy housekeeper to a goddamn powerhouse.
It's a brilliant change. In the remake, she's younger, more involved in the practice, and even has a potential love interest. It's like they realize, hey, this woman has a life outside of dusting and making tea.
Which is more than you can say for poor old Siegfried. He seems to strike out with every woman he meets.
Well, he is still carrying a torch for his deceased wife. But he does try to move on. There's this whole storyline with him attempting to court a woman named Dorothy.
How does that go? Does he finally get laid?
Let's just say his moves are about as smooth as sandpaper. Tristan actually tries to give him dating advice, which is absolutely hilarious.
Oh man, I gotta see that. It's like the blind leading the blind.
It's comedy gold,
Yeah.
but it also shows that Siegfried, despite his gruff exterior, is trying to find connection and happiness. He's not just this one-dimensional curmudgeon.
Yeah, there's depth there. He's a complex dude.
Yeah.
Which I guess is what makes this remake so interesting, that they've taken these characters we thought we knew and given them new layers, made them more relatable to a modern audience.
Exactly. And they didn't just focus on the older generation. They breathed new life into Tristan as well.
Oh yeah, Tristan. That dude is a walking disaster.
He is, isn't he? But in a lovable way. In the original, he's more of a charming rogue. But in the remake, he's this lovable fuck-up who somehow manages to keep his job.
He's constantly getting into scrapes,
Yeah.
making mistakes, but you can't help but root for him. It's like watching a puppy try to navigate a china shop. You know it's going to be a disaster, but you can't help but be entertained by the chaos.
That's a perfect analogy, and the remake really plays up that aspect of his character. There's this episode where Siegfried gives Tristan a car for his birthday, thinking it'll make him more responsible.
Oh, I can only imagine how that turned out.
Exactly as you'd expect. The car's a clunker that backfires constantly, and Tristan manages to piss off everyone in town with it.
That's classic Tristan.
Yeah.
He's a magnet for chaos, but somehow he always manages to land on his feet. It's like he's got a guardian angel looking out for him. Or maybe Siegfried just has a soft spot for the little shit.
Probably a bit of both.
Mhm.
But even though he messes up constantly, you can't help but love him. He's got this infectious enthusiasm and a good heart.
Yeah, he's like that friend who's always getting into trouble, but you stick by him because deep down, he's a good guy. Speaking of good guys, what about the romance between James and Helen? Did they crank up the drama there too?
Oh, absolutely. That's a major departure from the original. In the remake, their relationship is much more central to the story. They even get married.
Spoiler alert. But come on. Everyone knew they'd end up together. It's a feel-good show, for fuck's sake.
True, but it's the journey that matters, right? And their relationship isn't all sunshine and roses. They have their ups and downs, disagreements, just like any couple.
Yeah, life ain't always a picnic, even in the idyllic Yorkshire Dales.
Exactly. And that's what makes their story so compelling. It's grounded in reality, even though it's set in this picturesque world. There's this other dude, Hugh, who's also vying for Helen's attention.
Oh yeah, Hugh. What a prick.
He's a bit of an aristocratic snob, to be honest. James is clearly the better choice.
Well, duh. James is a sensitive, caring vet who loves animals.
Yeah.
Hugh is just a rich guy who probably shoots pheasants for fun.
Yeah.
I mean, who does Helen think she is, Lady Mary Crawley?
It's all about creating conflict and tension, right? Keeps things interesting. But yeah, ultimately, James and Helen are meant to be.
Good, because honestly, if she ended up with Hugh, I would have been pissed. So we've got complex characters, a love triangle, and a whole lot of animal shenanigans. What else does this remake bring to the table that the original didn't?
Well, one thing that's really interesting is how they incorporate the historical context. The show is set in the late 1930s and early 1940s, leading up to and during World War II. And they don't shy away from the impact that has on the characters and the community.
Yeah, there's this sense of dread hanging over everything as the war gets closer.
Yeah.
It's like a shadow creeping across the Dales.
It's not just a backdrop, though. They weave it into the characters' lives and decisions,
Right.
like how Tristan ends up joining the army.
Right, it adds a whole other layer of weight to his character arc. He's not just this goofy kid anymore. He's a young man facing the realities of war.
And there's also the whole TB testing storyline, which causes a lot of tension in the community.
It's crazy how a show about a vet can tackle such serious issues.
It's a testament to the writer's ability to balance lighthearted moments with heavier themes. They don't shy away from the realities of the time, but they also don't let it overwhelm the show's charm.
It's a delicate balance, but they pull it off.
So we've covered the characters, the romance, the historical context. Anything else we need to dissect before we wrap this deep dive up?
Well, we haven't talked about the filming locations. They're absolutely stunning.
Yeah, the Yorkshire Dales are like something out of a fairy tale.
And the production team did an amazing job of capturing their beauty. They used a lot of the same locations as the original series, but they also found some new ones that are equally breathtaking.
Like Grassington, which stands in for Darrowby.
It's the perfect setting for the show. Quaint, charming, and surrounded by breathtaking scenery.
It's enough to make you want to pack your bags and move to the Yorkshire Dales. Maybe open up a little pub, raise some sheep, maybe skip the sheep. But yeah, the scenery alone is worth a visit.
All right, so we've covered pretty much everything there is to know about this All Creatures remake. What's the final verdict? Is it a worthy successor to the original?
I think it is. It's a fresh take on a beloved story with more complex characters, a deeper exploration of themes, and some stunning visuals.
And let's not forget the humor. This show is fucking hilarious at times.
It's the perfect blend of heartwarming and hilarious.
All right, folks, that's it for our deep dive into the All Creatures Great and Small remake. We've dissected the characters, the plot, the historical context, and everything in between. Now go watch the damn show and decide for yourselves.
You know, it's fascinating how this remake manages to capture the spirit of the original while still feeling fresh and relevant.
So we've spent a couple deep dives now talking about all this All Creatures Great and Small stuff. We've covered the Scottish accents, the fake cows, the love triangles. What's the final verdict? Is this remake just a big steaming pile of shit, or does it actually add something new?
It definitely does something different. It's not just trying to be the original. It's a new take on a classic, and I think it does a good job of keeping the spirit of the old show while giving it a fresh coat of paint. It's modernized it, you know?
Yeah, but is it just for the old folks who remember the original? I mean, will anyone who wasn't alive in the 70s give a shit about this show?
Yeah, it's not just for old farts. I think there's something in there for everyone. The animals are cute, the scenery's gorgeous, and the characters are charming. But there's more to it than that. There are those deeper themes, like you said, like World War II, and the relationships are complicated. It's not just a simple story.
So it's not all sunshine and roses then?
Not exactly. It gets pretty real sometimes. They don't sugarcoat things. You got the war hanging over everyone's heads, and some of those animal cases are tough to watch. But I think that's part of what makes it good.
So it's more than just a feel-good escape then?
Yeah, it makes you think. It's about real life, you know? Life can be a bitch. And this show doesn't shy away from that. But it also shows you how to find the good stuff, even when things are tough.
So it's like a reminder that everyone's going through some shit. Even if you live in a beautiful place like the Yorkshire Dales.
Exactly. We all got problems. And seeing these characters deal with their own problems and come out stronger on the other side is inspiring. It gives you hope.
You're saying this show about a country vet can actually make people feel better about their own messed up lives?
I think so. It's like James Herriot's stories remind us of what's important. Family, friends, community, and taking care of each other. And the animals, of course.
All right, so we've got cute animals, stunning scenery, and some surprisingly deep life lessons. That's All Creatures Great and Small.
It's a good show. I recommend giving it a try.
There you have it, folks. That's our deep dive into All Creatures Great and Small. We've covered it all. Now go watch the damn show and tell us what you think.
And don't forget to check out the original series, too. It's a classic for a reason.
All right, folks, that's all for today's deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one. And remember, be kind to animals, even the ones that shit on your carpet. Peace out.
Okay.